Froggy Friday, oh, the vibe is tight. Tony's in the house and it's spooky tonight. Georgie's gorgeous gifts got that Halloween glow. Ribbit, 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 let the froggy show.
Hi and welcome back. It's Froggy Friday, the best day of the week. So today we're going to be trying something completely new. Off the back of the nightlight video from Wednesday night, I'm attempting to try and make a holographic type of version of frogs. So after giving my moulds a bit of a clean, because these need to be absolutely crystal clear. So my resin's been through my debubbling machine for about 18 minutes. I really needed this purely clear because we need to be popping clear into clear resin. So these are little frog moulds and they are ever so cute. So I'm just pouring clear resin into these moulds and allowing this to cure overnight. Like I say, the aim is to pop a blue light underneath and try and get like a holographic effect of a frog within a block of resin. Whether this is going to work, I don't know. So let's get into it and find out. So after pouring all these really slowly, and I did pour them slowly because I didn't want any extra bubbles to gather in the mould. These moulds are quite good for not gathering bubbles, to be fair. So I didn't have to mess about too much with it. And then I sat and babysat them for about half an hour to make sure that there was no bubbles rising to the surface. And if there was, I was there to pop them. So this is the extra prize for my giveaway from Wednesday night, my 200th upload. And this is just a little bit of clear resin going in. I have added a little bit of diamond dust to this just to add that little extra sparkle. But every make that I've made with resin through October, there's been at least a tiny bit of resin gone into this pot. And this will be part of the prize as well as the little nightlight. So check that video out, linked above. Good luck to all that enter. So this is now the following day and they are ready to be demoulded. So I'm just pushing them out. And I can't figure out whether this mould is slightly matte or whether it's just the resin, because when I'm doing them with UV resin, they seem to come out a lot clearer than when I use normal resin. So on top of doing 3 epoxy frogs, we're also going to be doing a few UV, one with glow in the dark pigment in and one without, just to see whether that makes a difference to the way it comes out. But let me just take a minute to say how cute these little frogs are. Again, I did expect them to be a lot bigger from Temu. This was another one of them oops moulds, and I'm sure we've all got some of them. So as I've said earlier, I'm also going to be doing some with UV resin. Now, there will be a video coming soon on this new Resiners Light and UV resin because honestly, I am well impressed. I'm a J Diction girl through and through, but yeah, this turned my head. It really did. It was really clear, and as long as you're squirting the bottle out in one go, not in lots of squirts, because that's what gives you the bubbles, this is really clear. So I'm just adding some to a cup with, and I mean a dab, a tiny dot of this glow in the dark pigment. And as you can see here, I am mixing really slowly because I don't want to be adding any more bubbles into this resin. So I'm just pouring it into one of the moulds and then popping it under this new Resiners lamp, which is again fantastic. I was really impressed with my double-sided lamp, but yeah, again, this one turned my head. Resiners are smashing it at the minute for equipment. So I'm just giving this mould a quick squeeze just to make sure that there's no air bubbles all gathered in the bottom, and then popping it under my lamp. I think the best bit about this lamp is the fact that you haven't got to mess about with wires and plugs. It's portable, and the resin cures really quick. So this took about 4 or 5 minutes to cure this full frog. So now all the frogs were fully cured, so it was time to pop them in the piece. Now again, we're going to be popping this into clear resin, and you can see how crystal clear this is. This is the craft resin, 1:1 ratio resin, and I've mixed up about 180 mils. So I'm just pouring the first cup in really slowly because I don't want to be introducing any more bubbles, and then pouring the second cup in. I tend not to use the dregs of the cup because that's where I find that you get bubbles when using clear resin, so I do use that for something else. So just doing exactly the same with the second cup, and then we pop in the frogs inside. So I'm doing all I can to remove bubbles from this resin, so I'm using my heat gun just to get into all the corners and make sure that it's really crystal clear. This is on the low setting, not the highest setting, and be careful not to burn your resin. And then we pop the little frogs in. Now when I popped this one in, there was 2 big bubbles around its neck, and I thought it was where I'd popped it into the resin, but it wasn't. You couldn't see them until you popped them into this piece, but the bubbles are actually within that frog, so I did consider redoing it, but by this point the resin had been through my debubbling machine for about 18 minutes, and I was worried about creating more bubbles with it getting thicker. So I'm just popping each one inside one by one and then popping the big one in. Now the only way that this is going to work is if these look completely see-through, so you can't see them when they're in the block of resin, and then when we put the blue light underneath, hopefully they should shine and the outlines of the frogs should show. That's the idea anyway. Whether in practice that's going to work, at this point I still haven't got a clue. So again, I'm using my heat gun just to get rid of all the bubbles that I can see, and I do in fact babysit this for quite some time just to make sure that no extra bubbles pop to the surface. Unfortunately, when you're pouring this much resin, it is so difficult to get a perfectly clear piece, no matter what resin you're using. And we'll see which one works better, whether the UV resin or the glow in the dark or just the plain epoxy works better, because different types of resin react differently. Now I have recently tried using UV resin to do earrings that has a holographic mould. It doesn't work. The UV resin just does not bond to the holographic bits, no matter how hard you try. So here you can just see me take this frog out and double check that it is the bubbles around his neck and not in the piece. And this is where I thought, actually I haven't really got the time to redo him. So I left this to sit for about 2 hours. So the temperature in my house is quite warm at the minute. So after about 2 hours, this was quite firm already, so I decided to pop the next layer on because I didn't want the defined lines between the layers. The whole point of this is that this needs to be a fully clear piece in order for this to work. So I'm just pouring in the second lot of resin, and again I'm doing this really slowly, but this time I'm being careful that there's no bubbles gathering around where the layers meet, because in previous pieces that I've done like this, that's where I've had the issues. But so far it's looking pretty good. They're looking pretty transparent. So I am going round the edge of each of these frogs with the mixing stick just to release any extra bubbles that's going to hang around the edges. And then I use my heat gun again to pop any remaining bubbles that have come to the surface. The other thing you can use to combat bubbles is isopropyl alcohol, but I tend to find in clear pieces it leaves like a mist in the resin and sometimes doesn't mix in properly, so I didn't want to risk that either. So I'm just sticking with the heat gun and making sure that most of the bubbles, or every bubble that I can find, I've got. This piece was really time consuming purely because I had to babysit it for quite some time. So at this point I've spotted where this large frog's nose is. There's 2 little holes and there's little air bubbles gathering. You might not be able to see the frog, but you can see these bubbles. So I'm just getting the edge of my silicone tool and effectively digging the bubbles out. So far, this is the frog that seems to be looking the best. It's the one that's the least transparent. I have actually sped this bit up for you because it took absolutely forever to go all the way around these frogs. And I and ahed once this was semi-cured. Again, about 2 or 3 hours later, I decided to pop another layer on. The time it takes to pour the different layers on will vary with resin to resin and the temperature of your room, as I've just proven with these pours. Turns out my house might be slightly too warm, as this resin was semi-curing in 2 hours. So I'm just repeating the whole process again, this time just nearly filling it up to the edge and then going round all the frogs once again and using my heat gun to pop any bubbles that has risen to the surface. Now at this point I am starting to panic a little bit because it's an awful lot of resin to be wasting if this doesn't work. And at the point of the voiceover, I still don't know whether it's worked. So I did end up going in with a third layer and just trying to get all the bubbles out of this, and then I left it to cure overnight. So just in case the whole thing was a disaster, I decided to make up this new frog mould that I've got. For this I'm using the Aquacast Turbo and the orange pigment from Resin just to do the pumpkin part of this mould. This is a little cute Halloweeny pumpkin frog that's a vase mould. So I'm just weighing out my Aquacast. I'm doing 150 grams of powder to 60 grams of water. Initially I did 40 grams because I had 100 grams in my head for some reason, but then I do add more water to it. Usually I eye this, but for the purposes of the video I have weighed it accurately. So if you're new to my channel or new to EcoPore, then this is absolutely fantastic. With this Aquacast Turbo you can usually demould in between 20 and 30 minutes. There is a normal Aquacast, but like I say, this is the Aquacast Turbo. Now instantly I knew there was something wrong because when I was mixing this, it was really, really thick and gloopy. Now it should be the consistency of pancake batter. So I knew I'd gone wrong somewhere with the water amount. So like I say, I do add another 20 grams of water. This bit I do actually eye. But then that's the perfect amount, and I give it a good stir, making sure that there's no lumps and that I get right down into the bottom of the cup because there is in fact a little groove on the bottom and powder tends to get stuck in there. So you've got about 3 or 4 minutes mixing time with this Aquacast Turbo. So after making sure that there's no lumps and I'll give it a good mix, I'm then adding my pigment to it. As I said before, the pigment I'm using is the orange Resin. Now the Resin pigments are absolutely stunning in EcoPore. You're never going to get a solid bright colour whenever you're using powders like this because they are white based. This is the colour after 2 drops. I decided to add another 3 drops to it just to make it that little bit deeper because this orange will be for the pumpkin part of the frog. Now my plan is to add EcoPore and resin together in order to create this stunning vase mould. This is the first time I've actually used this mould because it is a new one, but I'm absolutely loving this colour orange. So now it was time to pour it into the mould. So I did realise that the back of the pumpkin was higher than the front, so I knew that at some point I would have to tilt this mould in order to keep it within the pumpkin and not run into the frog part. The reason I'm pouring the EcoPore first is because EcoPore won't stick to resin, but resin will stick to EcoPore. And the combination of the two mediums go really, really well together. So I'm just topping up the rest of this pumpkin and then trying to clean out the eyes where it's fell forward. So this is the point that I'm having to hold it tilted until it starts to cure. So I grab a baby wipe and I go into the eyes and move it about as much as I can to try and get it all in that pumpkin and nowhere else. This does take a minute, so I will fast forward this part for you. And this stuff does cure quite quickly because by the time I'm finished messing about and trying to get it out of the eyes, it's actually curing enough so that I can let it go. This whole process took about 8 or 9 minutes, so about 10-12 minutes from mixing time. So now it was time to clean this up. It was fully cured. So I didn't want all the eco pour around the middle bit. So I just got my glove and got rid of all the extra thin bits that wasn't the pumpkin. And this was quite easy to do. And then I just got a baby wipe and cleaned out all the little extra bits. Then I wanted to pop some eyes into this piece. So I'm using some UV resin just to drop into the little eye holes. The UV resin I'm using is the Resiners. Yeah, I've recently tried this and it's really turned my head. Honestly, I'm loving the stuff. These are little cute frog eyes that I've got in packs of about 30. And then I'm curing it with my new Resiners lamp. So thank you to Resiners for sending me the lamp, the mat and the UV resin. I'm really enjoying trying them out. So after I've stuck the eyes in and made sure that they are secure, it was time to mix my resin and add my pigments. So the resin I'm using is the craft resin 1:1 ratio, and I'm using 2 different colour green pigments, the glitter green and the grass green. These are just some random mica powders that I picked up from Amazon, I believe, but a lot of them have like a gold fleck to them. They are really, really nice. So I'm mixing the 2 colours up together and giving that a good stir. The inside of this mould is actually textured. It's a matte mould. I'm sure it's supposed to be a candle mould of some sort, but I thought this green would look gorgeous with that orange. So after giving it a good mix, I then pour it into my frog. And you can see as I'm pouring this, that gold shimmer in with the green is absolutely stunning. So I'm just filling this up to the top. With the resin I have left, I'm just popping a little bit into this pumpkin mould. This is the pumpkin mould for the giveaway, which is in video number 75. As I've said before, each day through October that I've used a project with resin, I have poured at least a tiny bit of resin into this pumpkin pot. And the winner will be announced on 31st of October, which is my Halloween special. Now it's time to demold this one. So this was the backup project, as you know, just in case the other one didn't work. And let's see what this one looks like. Now this is quite a textured mould, and it is a matte mould. And we've had some seepage of the resin there. I think when I was trying to clean it up, it come away from the mould, but I kind of like that. And his little eyes. His eyes should have been here, not here, but yeah, I really like that. He's cool. So I'm just adding these little branches as extra decoration, and I think he looks lovely. Now on to the next one. So this is now ready to be demolded, and I'm a bit concerned about whether it's going to work or not. I mean, they look pretty transparent. I'm gutted about the bubbles in this one, but hey ho. Right, here we go. So the reason I chose this mould was because of the water effect on the top. Oh, it's a lot of resin to waste if it doesn't work. But wow, I'm really pleased with how clear that is. Let me turn the light off. So I'm hoping that that's going to work now once I light it up. Let's find out. So I've got various different lights. I think one's a white one, one's a coloured one for them ones. And we're going to try it with a blue light or UV light. So let's try with these bases first, shall we? So being under the coloured light, it sort of worked, but it didn't give me the effect I wanted. The UV resin ones tend to look better with this coloured light. So let me bring you down level so that you can see a bit better. You can see there's certain patches of the glow in the dark that shines. Yeah, but this one's not great. Let's try with the white light. Now this one does look a little bit better. Even better when I turn the lights off. But it still wasn't giving me the hologram effect that I wanted. So I'm trying this with the Resiners UV light, and I was absolutely amazed. This was how it was originally supposed to work anyway, underneath the blue light. But yeah, I so need to get a blue light base for this. So I've just turned the lights off and look at that. I am so pleased it's worked, all this work. And yeah, it's done what I wanted it to do. You can see that the epoxy works a lot better than the UV, which goes back to what I was saying earlier about different resins working in different ways. But the epoxy has worked spot on. That big frog is fantastic. So all in all, I would say that this was an absolute success. And I absolutely love it. And I'm just so pleased it worked. So once again, this has been part of the Froggy Friday project. The link is in the description below. I hope you've loved these two pieces as much as I have. I'll leave you with some glamour shots. I've been Tony from Georgie's Gorgeous Gifts. Stay safe, happy crafting, and bye for now.
Witchy creations, spooky sensations, Georgies, Georgies, gifts so gory, horror spinning, reasons grinning, Tony's tricks for Halloween glory.
Ghosts are trapped in resin frames, skulls that grin and